Welcome to the Regeneration Collective podcast, The Next UN Visions for a Regenerative Future. I'm Silke von Brockhausen, a UN insider with 18 years across more than a dozen UN missions and founder of the Regeneration Collective. As the UN just had its 80th anniversary and the campaign for the next Secretary General gets underway, amid protracted conflicts, widening inequalities, and cross-planetary boundaries, we ask, how can the UN become the platform through which people, institutions, and the more than human world repair and transform broken systems and create conditions where life can thrive? In each episode, we speak with regenerative practitioners, policy shapers, indigenous knowledge holders, peace builders, culture makers, and frontline humanitarians about the lived experiences and visions that could translate into regenerative UN policies, organizational culture, and operations. This is for UN staff, partners, member states, and bridge builders who are curious about what regeneration means in practice and who are ready to turn the UN into a trailblazer for this shift. And today, I'm especially honored to have Liliana Uruburo here, who is one of my inspiring colleagues and visionaries who has started a little transformation inside the organization already. Liliana is one of the quiet revolutionaries transforming the heart of the United Nations. For over 18 years, she has been at the forefront of innovation, culture change, and organizational transformation, helping to bring the UN Secretariat General's vision of a modern, agile, and innovative UN to life. As advisor for innovation and transformation in the Business Transformation and Accountability Division, Liliana nurtures a global grassroots movement of change makers within the UN, people who believe the system can evolve. Through transformative spaces, she is pioneering a new model of leadership, one rooted in relationship, presence, and possibility. Her work bridges technology, creativity, and the human spirit, building communities of practice that connect thousands of staff members worldwide and invite them to reimagine how the UN can work with life. Known for her authenticity and her ability to make the impossible feel not just possible, but inevitable, Liliana is redefining what it means to lead inside one of the world's most complex organizations. Hello, Liliana. Welcome to the podcast, and thanks for being here.
Hello, Silke. Thank you so much. I mean, you don't know how much it means to have someone like you sharing these stories and voices, and it's really a great honor to be here today with you.
Thank you, Liliana. And let's get straight in with the first question I ask all of my guests. What does regeneration mean to you, and why does it matter right now?
Yes, so I'm going to be a little bit honest. Initially, I was struggling to understand what regeneration would mean outside of agriculture. I mean, it's very clearly like that's where it came from, right? In regenerative practice in agriculture. And, I started to see it in our work and I was like, well, how does this apply? But really, it's about our what Otto Scharmer calls our social soil, the connections and the emotions and the feelings and everything that lies beneath that you don't see on the surface, and the need to nurture that across relationships within our institutions and our teams and workplaces. And so to create an environment where everyone can flourish and everyone can grow and contribute. I've seen so often, the system kind of push people down to the point where they're just not contributing much anymore, and it's just a day-to-day hum. And then you're seen as, someone who doesn't do much, and maybe you're not really appreciated anymore within the team, and it's this like vicious cycle downward. Whereas, if you put people into a situation where they can flourish, they can apply their skills, they're free to use their creativity because everyone has something to contribute. And so, how can we create really tangibly such an environment in our workplace?
That's a beautiful definition and so life affirming. And you touched also about that right now, it's not the reality for everyone in the system. And bringing these principles into the awareness of our colleagues has also been one of your passions over the last
Yes,
decades in the
yes,
UN.
yes.
You have spent almost 20 years leading change from the inside. So, can you maybe tell us a little bit how did that come about? What was your journey, your story to wanting to actually be the change in the system?
So, I mean, it actually started before. I was in the tech sector and I was part of the internet revolution, the dot-com boom, where things were changing very quickly and helping primarily public sector organizations, transform their work and their businesses through technology. But over time, I slowly started to realize that it was much more than just the technology. We always have, even now with AI, it's like, oh, AI is going to save us, it's going to fix the world. Technology itself will never fix the world. This is a matter of technical solutions versus adaptive solutions, and you can't slap a technical solution onto an adaptive problem and expect it to work. And that's why you do see a lot of failures. And so I became more and more interested, and then social in the people side and the network side. And then social media started to come out. And I was like, okay, there's again, oh, social media is going to save the world. It's going to save us all. And I decided to take a little pause and go back for a master's degree. And I chose cultural anthropology and non-Western sociology. And everyone was like, what? Why don't you do, if you want to work at the UN, why don't you do, political science or international studies or whatever, or even if you want to stay in tech, do an MBA, right? Because that's the way to get ahead. And I was like, no, because I want to understand what's really behind people and how people work, because I've seen firsthand how difficult it is to get people to change and to adopt new technologies. And, so how can we delve deeper into that? And then, I mean, somehow miraculously, because I really never thought it would happen that I would actually work at the UN, I got a consultancy. And I was like, okay, well, this will be cool. I'll do a few months until I find a real full-time job, etc. And here I still am. And then even like within the UN, I think I was just very lucky that I ended up in these roles where I could play multiple hats, and I had like really supportive supervisors who wanted to drive change, who were, trying to bring about some big change within the organization. And they saw in me someone who can help with that and help them advance that. And so I was given a lot of freedom actually to try new things, to push the boundaries, and it worked. And so as people saw that, doing things differently and trying it, it was, there was more and more support for that kind of work. And now you see it much more commonly across the organization. And then, the last few years has been focused almost exclusively on the people side. I mean, obviously, technology is a part of that, but not so much implementing technologies and bringing change through that, but that foundational culture and mindset, which is so critical. And there's a lot of work being done with the Quintet of Change and UN 2.0, and how do we bring in new skills and get the organization to better leverage technology and other key approaches and methodologies like BSI and strategic foresight. But you're never going to be able to really fully change unless you fundamentally change the mindset and the culture beneath that. And so that's what I've really been focused on for the last few years. So I don't know, it was not an intentional journey. It just kind of meandered along, working on different kinds of things. But I mean, for me, what the greatest part has been to be able to work with colleagues from all over the organization. I've never been like New York focused. I've always been working globally and working with colleagues in different entities, even across the UN system, which I think, is really, really important, because those synergies across entities and those relationships, like, I talked about at the beginning, building those relationships, those things that you don't see, right? It's not a policy that you can tangibly hold on to or refer to, but it's those critical relationships that help to advance this kind of work.
Wow, you've touched upon so many different aspects there I would like to learn more about.
Mhm.
It just sounds also such makes sense. You come from technology, but you develop this interest in the people, the relationship, and how we can actually really achieve system change sustainably and effectively through these different tools. Can you tell us what you've learned through this journey? How in the UN you can actually make a change? How can you trigger some transformation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, you need both the top and the bottom. And so you need the kind of grassroots support of change agents, whatever their functionality or wherever they are, whatever their level, people who are helping to support this kind of work just out of passion, the early adopters, the front runners. Um, but you also very much need a senior sponsor. There needs to be somebody who not's making the decisions, but who can push boundaries and obstacles, get things out of the way for you, protect you when others are pushing back against the change.
Mm.
You don't get your head chopped off or lose your job, whatever it is. So I think that kind of duality is really important, but I think it's also extremely important, and this is what the one thing we don't do that well in the UN is that middle management tier of getting to them, because what's been happening a lot is they've been getting squashed between the two, the top and the bottom, but they don't feel like they're part of that movement themselves. And we're still struggling with that, with how to get that middle management really engaged and supported in that. But then, you can also have individuals, like even if you really want to make a big project or change, you need that kind of structure. But you also have instances of like where one person can really have an impact. And I think with transformative spaces, we're seeing that. Colleague Gabe from UN Women, he's a training manager, and he was developing these workshops and, running it for his organization as he's mandated to. And then he was telling me about it. And I was like, wow, that sounds really great. And he said he would love to offer it to more people, but he can't do that from where his role is. So I offered that he pilot it with our change agent network, New Work. It's called New Work in the UN. So to test it there and then to see if we would maybe find a way to scale that. And, the once we experienced his workshop, it was so transformative that we could see like this can make a real difference, because it like for me, the first event was like a fundamental transformation. Like it unleashed things inside of me that I didn't even know were there. It was so amazing. And so, slowly we've been scaling that and trying. And, that's just one person with a passion making a difference.
It sounds amazing. And it wasn't about his own agenda or about his own organization. It was about sharing what he knew and how he could maybe help people to be better leaders or better do their job or develop their potential, right?
Yeah,
And you
absolutely.
mentioned transformative spaces, and I know you're one of the champions and leaders behind it. What is it for those of us who don't know about it?
Yes. So it is a bit of a big, vague concept, but I think that comes from the like 10x mentality of like we want to achieve this major thing. So the vision is very kind of high level, but it is also practical in many ways. And fundamentally it's about cultivating safe spaces so that people can, reflect and creating that social soil space where people can regenerate, right? Like even if we cannot change your team and the structure you have there, you can come to this place and experience what it is to have a regenerative space so that you can openly dialogue, co-create with others, and give yourself the space to transform from within. And practically, what that means is workshops that are run, they're experiential workshops, though. I mean, I have been, at the forefront and planning of many, many a webinar. But these are not webinars. You don't come and just sit and listen and then go back and do your own thing. You actually have to participate. You experience the practices that are being taught as part of this workshop, and you do it together with others in the event itself. And the feedback is always really amazing. People are just like, felt so good to just be able to share openly, and I felt really safe. And then we encourage them to take those practices back to their own teams and their own work. And you can come back. You can take it any number of times. It's not like something that you could do once and whatever. I mean, we all know how hard it is to change behaviors and habits. It takes time. And so slowly just trying to build up that community as well of people who have gone through this workshop and who can, then start to amplify that kind of nurturing space in other places as well and support each other.
It sounds really like a very unique initiative and also very powerful for colleagues. And I hear from our discussion that Regenerate in the UN, it's a lot about creating spaces for dialogue, for trust, for collaboration, for personal growth, discovering your potential. Can you maybe take us to, let's say, 10 years forward, the UN is completely regenerative. What would that, in your view, look like, feel like, taste like, smell like? What is different to what it is now, maybe?
Yeah, that's a big one, right? That's a lot. I mean, there's multiple levels too, right? Because
Mhm.
there's the UN within, and then the UN is supporting and collaborating with stakeholders and clients. And from within, I see an environment where staff are more empowered, where it's not the command and control structure, but staff are really
Mhm.
empowered. The managers have trust that the staff are going to deliver, and
Mm.
give them the space, right, to make certain decisions on their own and move things forward. And part of that is the flexibility. So we have flexible working arrangements, we have reasonable accommodation, but seeing those kinds of things applied with more trust and giving people the freedom to, work when and where is most productive for them, because really when you feel well, when you feel safe, productivity increases. And there are actual studies of this. One study that shows a 20% increase in productivity. So if we want to be able to do more with less, we need to have a safe space in which to do that. Also, much more collaboration across entities, across locations. But we still tend to be, that sort of nuclear focus. This is my team, and I don't go outside of that. That's still very, very common. And that's in many organizations. I'm not saying that this is unique to the UN. That happens all over. But, developing those skills to collaborate more globally and to reach out outside of your normal sphere, because you never know where you might find an answer or solution. The newer community that I mentioned, that wasn't something that I created in New York. It started in Geneva with
Mhm.
another group of colleagues. And so, but because I reached out to ask about it, instead of me duplicating or creating something new and different, we were able to just expand that. And so, again, we talk a lot about do more with less, about reducing duplication, reducing the effort, but we need the basic day-to-day skills of how to do that better and how to engage with one another better. And so that's what I hope to see in the future. And then that would expand out to member states and civil society, the private sector, everyone we work with, where it's a much more open and exclusive collaboration. So we don't see the private sector or member states as just donors and providing equipment or giving us stuff, but they're actual true partners and collaborators in this process and co-creating together.
Wow, it sounds like an amazing future scenario and a beautiful working environment where people can show up as who they are and contribute with their full potential and get supported and can thrive. And I mean, I have seen it personally already in many teams across the UN, but if that would be the standard and if we had
Right.
these tools available for everyone, it I think there's so much power in this kind of decentralized, empowered, trust focused, relationship focused, collaboration focused, listening focused kind of
Listening is
working,
so
right?
key.
And I feel like this resonates with colleagues so much, but there's often no time, so much pressure. There might not be resources for letting colleagues go on this trainings. And it can be frustrating at sometimes. And I believe for everybody also involved in this work, but can you inspire a young colleague maybe? Can you give advice to someone who is new to the organization? How can they get started and maybe try to create this in their own teams, even if
Mhm.
they might not have the power that they think they need?
Yeah, I mean, it is tough. I feel for younger people in the organization. I mean, often they do have time to participate in these types of things. And honestly, like most of the workshops are 2 hours. I mean, it's 2 hours. We're not talking about a week or a day. It's 2 hours.
Mm.
Take a, step away, turn off the other screens and other chats and just focus for 2 hours. And it is hard in this day and age. And everything snap, 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 a quick,
Mm.
instant, social media kind of mentality. Everything's a crisis, everything is urgent. It's even 2 hours is hard, but it is possible. It really is possible. And so, to be a part of that, and then through that, they can find connections to other people. So maybe they don't have the support with their own team, but they can find support in other teams and in these networks that are working towards us. And there are many networks in the UN who are working towards this type of vision. And I think the most important thing of that, though, is for them to see different types of behaviors modeled. Because unfortunately, what can happen is they see the bad behaviors being modeled by managers. And then they think, oh, okay, well, I have to behave that way to get ahead. I have to behave in that same way. And again, I'm not saying this is unique to the UN. It happens in all organizations. I just listened to an audiobook about this guy, advising young people to really observe everything going on in our organization and try to emulate it as well as possible so that they fit in and they can get ahead. That's how you manage your career, by copying those around you. And it's like, but do we really want to copy bad behaviors? Do we really want to copy the boss who yells at his staff all the time, or the micromanager, or I mean, we shouldn't be encouraging these types of behaviors within the organization or in any organization. And so, you know take this as an opportunity to see other types of behaviors. And maybe you're afraid that that's going to stop your career, but to be honest, I think society in general is headed in this direction, and the younger generations aren't going to tolerate the kind of negative behaviors as much as we may have done. And so it's just generally moving in that direction. And so you could actually be at the head of that, forefront of that, instead of seeing it as, oh, maybe this is, bad for my career. You could be the leader of the future, is what I'm trying to say to them.
Thank you so much for giving these tips for our young leaders in the system. And I hope all of them will follow them, and they can always reach out to us for more. I think personally that change starts with yourself, right? Like when you feel unhappy and unappreciated or something is off, you really also need to look at what is there that I can personally change myself. It's about inner development, personal growth. And you mentioned that also earlier, but what does that mean for you in an organizational context? And also, do you maybe have some advice for any daily routines people can do on this topic?
Yeah, well, what we teach also in the workshops is in mindfulness, for example. So that's a 3-minute mindfulness practice that you can use on your own, that you can use in your team meetings. And also the collective listening practice, I think, is so important for us to just start listening to each other better. And stop like jumping and reacting all the time, which again is hard in this day and age. And I think it's also important to not just get involved in the networks within the UN system, but also outside, because it gives you different perspectives. And it can, sometimes, as you said, you're feeling unappreciated, you're feeling like, the bureaucracy and the weight of the UN, and especially the current moment, which is really difficult for so many people. It can be hard to escape the negativity. And sometimes when you step outside and you get inspired by others, or you even find out that, others in other organizations are going through something similar. We tend to think that everything is greener on the other side of the pasture, but it's, there are problems everywhere. There are complex challenges everywhere. And sometimes, that spark of inspiration from somewhere else can make a huge difference. It does make a huge difference for me.
Right. That's amazing advice already, how to get started.
Yeah. There's also one more thing too. One, the UN, it's a very special organization, and we as staff also tend to take the UN on as a huge part of our identity, and for young people too, many young people, it's like, wow, to have reached the UN, that's a massive achievement, and friends and family are so proud. And so sometimes you can feel like maybe I shouldn't complain, or why am I complaining, or I should just stick this out because it's the UN, and it becomes such a deep embedded part of our identity. But try to remember that you got there because of who you were, because of the skills that you had, and you can apply those skills anywhere. You can apply those skills anywhere. And if it's better for you to move to a different UN organization or even outside of the UN, try not to let the UN identity overtake your own, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think we are who we are because we have all these, I would say, over 130,000 staff that bring their cultures, their values, their personalities, their skills, and
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
together makes the UN so amazing and
Yes.
one of the most fascinating places to work at. And I appreciate it so much that I have colleagues from 193 member states and all these backgrounds. So
Yes. Yes.
a
Yes.
great pep talk and great reminder that it's us who make the UN
Yes.
the place it is, and we have a say in it, and we can be part of creating it and building it and forging it into what we think it should look like to address the problems, issues, world in the 20.
Yep. Yep.
Very good point. I still feel, you're so full of energy and positivity and optimism that there is this option that we can move the UN into this direction. Makes you stay so positive when sometimes the system feels so slow and heavy and currently is in this deep crisis.
Well, I have to say, I'm not always positive. We all have our
Of
moments. We
course.
all have our doubts, human being. Have also, I almost left the UN myself last year
Mhm.
because I had this, amazing offer to work more on social innovation. So really at the more directly impacting communities. But yeah, as you said, the UN's a very special place. And, I mentioned earlier, I've been lucky enough to work on some really amazing projects and meet so many incredible colleagues. And it's really the colleagues more than the institution itself that keeps me going. The people all over the world doing incredible things. I can't even imagine right now, for example, in UNRWA or other locations, Haiti. I mean, it's a struggle. And, you know, if I can do something that makes it better for them, then why not? I have the energy and I have the skills, so use it. I think being able to apply my skills and to give what I have is what makes it worthwhile. And that's what counters the negativity. Because there's going to be negativity everywhere. And there's going to be problems everywhere. Like I said, I was in the private sector before the UN, also faced
Mhm.
issues, management issues, colleague issues. Like it's everywhere,
Yeah.
unfortunately. There's no place that's perfect. But yeah, and also, I mean, to be honest, like I run and I do yoga and I, have to exercise as much as possible to keep my sanity
Good.
because it's not just, life is not just about work. And that's another key part of that future that you asked me about.
Mm.
Work-life balance. I've felt like I've seen, at least in HQ, the trend go towards the more private sector mentality of like where you have to work 16 hours a day or you're not really contributing. But that's not how the UN was when I joined. There may have been moments, for example, during the GA or a major conference where yes, but it wasn't a regular thing. And now it seems to be kind of getting institutionalized. We need to go back to that balance where
Mm.
people have families, they have kids, they need time to exercise, they need to take a break because it's so important to like reset. You can't be creative and innovative and energetic when you're just in the hamster wheel nonstop.
So wise and inspiring. And in my previous podcast, one guest also said, what regeneration means really is that you leave meetings full of energy and not drained.
Yeah.
That would be such a great indication if people after meetings were so energized and would have all the tools and the support and the relationships they needed to make a huge difference on this planet to serve also the people even better than can they do? And how can you do that if you're burned out and drained? And I feel like this is really the core of why I'm also doing this podcast, to find these ideas and these colleagues and the tools to bring this in. So I thank you so much for sharing your energy and wisdom here. And because we're already running out of time, I want to ask you the last question that I ask all of my guests as well is, imagine you would be the new Secretary General in 2027. What would the first 100 days look like? What would be some of the things you would implement immediately to maybe get the UN more on this track of regeneration and more energy?
Yes. Well, first, to be honest, I would not want to be the Secretary General. I prefer to be the little magician behind the scenes, making things happen, making things happen. But
It's
really, it
not
would
an easy job.
yeah. Well, no, but it's also it's like, that's the position you're the front, you're spokesperson, right? And not
Mm.
you're not doing you're getting the advice of everybody in your team. And I prefer to be one of those people, doing the work and making things happen. It's just the role I've always played. But even whatever position, my main thing would be like to get a start towards that future vision, by creating, and we can't call it a working group. I'm sorry, we've had enough working groups and task forces in the UN. We'll find something else to call it, but to bring people together, and that means staff, that means member states, that means civil society, private sector, academia, and the general public, to sit down, step back, reflect. What is the UN? It was founded for a certain thing. We're 80 now. We've done the job that we were, expected to do. The world has changed dramatically. Everybody agrees on that. But how do we then transform for the future? And so bringing together this group to really sit down and have real dialogues and truly reimagine what the UN could and should be for the future.
Let those that make up the UN across all continents have a say in it, a stake in it, and reimagine
And the
it. And
people we serve, they should also have a say in it. They're the
beautiful.
ones who get what we give, and what if we're giving them things that they don't need anymore?
It would make it so powerful, the outcome, right? If everybody would agree with this, and then especially those that are affected would know that they had agency as well.
Yeah.
Very powerful. It fits also into the vision from John Alexander, who was on the podcast too. He wanted to then do a citizen assembly, which sounds also very similar
Yes.
to the
Yes.
idea. I think that is a beautiful first step. So let's see where we are heading in 2027. Until then, I'm just so inspired that we have colleagues like you in the system that are holding up the flag for transformation and providing all
Rebirth.
these beautiful. Yeah, maybe now it's time for a rebirth day after the 80th birthday. So thank you for bringing in all of your spark and your energy. And I hope we'll continue these conversations. If people are interested now in your work around transformative spaces or maybe connecting with you, how can they find out more?
So the easiest is to go to un.org/new work, and that's NEWWORK. And from there, you'll find the links to transformative spaces and other projects that have been implemented over the years to bring more innovation and culture change into the organization.
Beautiful. Thank you so much and all the best with your mission.
Thank you so much, Silke. Thank you for the time.